Well, it's a parody. And if you're going to be a parody, you have to be a parody of something.
Just a little program tip if folks listening in, we could make room for your questions if you have them. And as always, we'll answer them best we can. Plenty of room for that. And we have a great group of panelists here to answer them. So we got 2 hours of fun and festivities, all ending with Chris Sabato talking about his one-man show. Lots of fun today.
So was Young Frankenstein a parody of Frankenstein?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Only younger.
And funnier. And taller hair.
It had exactly the same electrical equipment.
Nah, it was just a prequel.
Dayquil, I think. Or was it NyQuil?
But you're right. They didn't they? Mel Brooks physically borrow the
Ken Strickfaden was his name. I got to meet the guy, and he brought a lot of that stuff over to the Academy one day and set it up for us, and we screened Young Frankenstein and talked to him, and he demonstrated those high-voltage devices in the lobby afterwards.
Jacob's Ladders, that's what they're called.
In the over on Lancashire in North Hollywood?
No, in Wilshire.
Oh, yeah, okay.
The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Theater. Sam Goldwyn Theater, that's what it is.
We get some makeup for Chris Fenwick because that shine on his head is bothering me.
It's called a specular.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do always at officehours.global. Our first hour, a general discussion of production and IT-related topics where we answer audience-submitted questions. Second hour, typically a deeper dive into a topic. And today, our second hour, we'll be talking to Chris Sabato. Chris has streamed more than 120 sporting events a year on a limited budget and staff, often working with NCAA Division III sports broadcasts. So he'll be covering data integration, equipment, and a whole lot more. So it should be a very interesting second hour. Mitch, it is time for the regular first hour. What have we got today?
Good morning, Bill. Appreciate it. First in from Douglas Carmichael. What SSD size would you specify for a 14-inch MacBook Pro that will be an everyday carrier and adjunct to my desktop M2 Pro Mac Mini in the studio? I'm going to have a 4 terabyte internal SSD and a 4 to 8 terabyte auxiliary SSD for sample libraries and content.
Jason's going to start us out this morning.
Yeah, well, it depends pretty heavily on what you're using the MacBook for. If it's the same purpose as your desktop, then I would say your hard drive should be the same size. That's generally my rule.
And Sky has some thoughts. Sky?
If you're going to use a portable one that you could also use with your cameras and things like that, I was just editor's friend here, and actually a series of editor friends were very upset with the SanDisk that were failing on them. Now, I've used the Samsung, the T5, and they've worked now for at least 4 or 5 years. So that's a comparative. And just if you're going to get a portable SSD, the SanDisk, while inexpensive, you may want to check their quality now.
I will note that in my experience, the SSDs that Apple puts into them are incredibly fast. That would cause me to upgrade that whenever I can, although I'm at a 2 terabyte internal on my main laptop, and I have so much external storage on it that seems to handle everything I need to do in terms of Final Cut editing and things like that. I don't put scratch discs or things like that on my internal drive. I generally have them outside. So for general work, that seems to be enough for me, but your mileage might vary. If you're going to be editing and things like that on your laptop, you might want to boost up that incredibly fast internal drive. Mitchell, you have a thought?
Yeah, suggestion for the external drive, G drives work great.
And Alex?
Yeah, I tend to have a couple 2 terabytes. The 4 terabytes are just a little expensive, and so I tend to get two that I can two terabytes. For the ones that I work off of, a lot of times I'm building NVMEs. I just buy the cases and I get more bang for my buck that way. But you do have to spend some time and put it together carefully. So if you don't get there's a little gel that comes with it, and if you don't put that on, it's a little sticker, and you think that it doesn't mean anything, it looks like a little piece of gum, it won't work as well. Just in case you're wondering, it's super important to follow instructions, just in case you're wondering. But otherwise, there's a lot of them. If I was going to get one drive, I'd probably get a 4 terabyte.
So Douglas, hope that helps you, and congratulations. New equipment is always exciting. Let's get to the next question.
From David Paskin from Miami, Florida, asking, anyone have any insight on what's going on with original sound in Zoom? It seems that it isn't available to free accounts that don't have a credit card on file.
John Preto.
Yeah, this is interesting. After listening to Andy Carduccio talk about how many support calls that caused with original sound being on, it makes sense that they would pull that from the free account, is my impression.
Yeah, wasn't that interesting? Because Andy was here on the show fielding a question from somebody just like this, and that was amazing that they had done a study, and there was so much back-end goings on that something we thought was easy turned out to be a big burden on the crew there. Mitchell, you had a thought?
Yeah, I think Andy used a word, magnitude. So
yeah, orders of magnitude more support was required because of that one feature, original sound. David Paskin?
I absolutely appreciate that. My concern is if I'm talent on a free account, joining someone who has maybe a pro account or a business account, I want to be able to turn on original sound for myself. So while I understand the support call dilemma, it seems like pulling a pretty fundamental tool.
Yeah. Alex?
It could also be the account itself. Someone jumping into an event could use it, but you sourcing an event may be a different story. So it depends on who's sourcing the event. Could make a difference. I know that, like with high bandwidth mode and other things, it's who starts the event that matters. So that could be connected to it. But we're doing some more research. I'd probably ask that question again tomorrow or Saturday. There's some folks that we're going to try to get to the bottom of pretty quickly.
Excellent. That's one of the things Office Hours does really well. So thank you for the question. Let's move on to the next one.
From Douglas Carmichael, in an article about the network at SoFi Stadium, the article mentioned an average data volume of 20 terabytes with a peak of 32 per concert. Would using NDI versus SMPTE 2110 help in reducing that figure?
Jason's going to help us. Jason?
If the article is the one that I found from ZDNet, I think you overlooked a little part of this. First, there's no evidence that they're using SMPTE for that. And second, the broadcast video that they're referring to, it says somewhere in the article that it uses 12 gigabits per second to distribute to 2,000 different screens. So, I mean, the math on that data consumption doesn't add up.
Fair enough. Next question.
Next question in from David Paskin in Miami, Florida. Can someone explain when and how to use variables in Companion when you're building buttons for Zoom OSC ISO using presets?
We've had a lot of discussions of Companion here and in some of our after hours things. David Paskin's going to help us out with this, David.
Well, no, I'm not going to help us out at all.
You're not, because you asked the question.
Right. No, I guess here's my question. So I'm one of those guys that loves presets. If someone gives me something that's done, I'm just going to plug it in. But I hear lots of folks talking about how valuable it is to use variables. And so my specific question is, if I'm not building buttons and actions for myself, is there a need for me to worry about variables when I'm just pulling over the presets? And if we don't have an answer today, I'll pop into after hours and ask it there.
Yeah, it sounds like if you've been successful in getting all your projects done without diving into them, it may be one of those things that can make things better and convenient, but it isn't mission critical. So maybe in that respect, you're okay with that. Alex is going to give us his thinking.
Yeah, one of the things that to often do, I mean, Discord is a great solution for asking for some of those things, but also just write down things that, this is a general term, write down things that you have a question about. A lot of times David's been able to bring it here. A lot of times we think about things during the day, like, I don't understand why this doesn't work, or I don't understand why this, just write it down. I have a notes thing that I just write those things down. So I have notes open and I go, I don't understand why this is what it is. I don't understand why this thing happens in Keynote. I don't understand why this thing happens in Resolve. I don't, and I have these little sections of things that I'm, and then when I don't feel like working for a minute, like I need a break, or I'm trying to think of questions for office hours, or I have an opportunity to talk to someone that I know. I go over those things. Okay, tell me about this. So I think that keeping continuing to write them down. We have had some sessions with some folks that know a lot about OSC in after hours. We hope to do more of those in the coming month, and we've done them here in office hours as well. So definitely keep stacking up those OSC and ISO questions, because we have some pretty good sources to talk to about it.
Ronnie Settle has thought too. Ronnie.
Yeah, excuse me. I can just speak generally about variables in Companion. So, for Zoom OSC, one of my buttons is like active speaker, or who's actually in audio. And I don't have it set up to where I can show you today, but you can put the variable on the actual button. The button doesn't do anything in this instance, but it will show you who's speaking on the screen, and So the same thing with House of Worship setups. We use ProPresenter, and so I can have it show the variable is the timer, how much time is left. So what's in the back of the room, I can also see it right there on the screen, and so that's just a basic explanation of variables in Companion. You can do a lot more with it, but at its very basic, you can show cool things that are in real time on your screen there on your Stream Deck. So
interesting. Chris Fenwick has thought too.
The last few days I've been digging deeper into this. I asked a question a couple days ago about getting a Stream Deck to play a specific video, and Alex, yes, you deciphered that question properly. It can be done through Companion using some tricks there, and I feel like I'm a new student who's been shown where the door to the library is, and now I realize I have to read all the books inside that library, so it's very confusing. I did come across a very interesting video the other day where using VLC as a playback device, using Companion, you can actually pull the time code or the time remaining in the video off of the video that's playing and display it on one of your Stream Deck buttons, which I thought was really cool. So you just have one button to look at regardless of what video is playing, and it'll give you a countdown to, the next event. So yeah, Companion is super deep.
Nice. David, I hope that helped you get your answer here. Let's move on to the next question.
From Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington, Sky asked, I'm digging out my old GoPro Hero 3 Plus. Are the new GoPros easier to use than the old 2-button controls?
Nothing could be harder than Courtney. Dive into it.
They're not simpler to use, but they are easier to use because they have things like a LCD screen on the front, the new Hero 11, so you can frame it. It also has LCD screen on the back. It doesn't require waterproof housing. It's waterproof without putting it inside that little plastic box. So, yeah, it has, automatic image stabilization built in. A lot of good stuff that your 3 probably doesn't.
Sky.
2 hours of my life that I will never get back last night. Oh my word. We're doing the tennis tournament next week with 1F Jeff, and we wanted to do some time lapse. And Alex, you inspired me to break out the old gear. Oh, you owe me, Alex. You owe me 2 hours of my life back. Just saying.
You're saying you didn't like the menu structure
I
of
forgot,
old GoPros?
I forgot. The therapy and the pain had gone. It just subsided, and now it's a vivid memory and lack of sleep.
Yeah, it's not the most intuitive system. Chris Fenwick.
I think it's brilliant engineering on GoPro's part where when a GoPro sits untouched for 2 years, the menu structure magically changes and makes it impossible to use. So you just go out and buy a new one. Planned obsolescence. I totally agree that the new LCD screens make them much easier. The old ones, Sky, I feel for you. Those 2 hours you'll never get back. I don't even try to use a GoPro without tethering it to the iPhone app. I find it much easier to deal with stuff on the app than it is on the device itself. I remember, I think, Alex, you mentioned something about the other day. I can't remember what box it was, but Kevin knows. Oh, it's the decimators. Kevin knows how to run it from the software, I think, and the buttons or vice versa. I can't remember, but yeah, sometimes you find a way to deal with a piece of hardware. I can't stand GoPros. I also find it very interesting that I've seen many YouTube thumbnails pop up as I scroll through YouTube endlessly about the death of GoPro's over. They've seen their best times, and even some people that we know here in office hours are like, oh, I wouldn't touch a GoPro at all. I have a 10. I really like it.
Alex?
We don't use GoPros because they're easy. We use them because we thought that they'd be easy. so anyway, so that's the problem with the GoPro is you think it's going to be easy and then it's never easy. The only time there was a moment in time when I was really good at a GoPro because we had these spherical rigs that we built with 6 GoPros at a time, and you had to get them all started and you had to get them all set, and you always wanted to change all the settings, and you just got used to muscle memory of down, down, over, down, down, over, down, down, up, 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 down, 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 and you just go on the thing. And you realize that's what the sports kids are doing. Like when they're doing it so often that they, and that's how I learned it. Is I just watched and I asked it was a Red Bull skydiver that I was talking to about it, and he said it's just like a game. It's down. It's like having a code. It's like down, down, over, down, down, up, down, down, over. And he just said you just know what that pattern is. And watching him do it, because he puts it on his little helmet every time he jumps out of a plane, you just see him pick up a thing and he go, and then it'd be ready to go. Exactly the way he wanted it. And he'd always reset it because he goes, then I don't know the pattern. If you don't know what it is, I had to he just reset it every single time and then do the thing. Anyway, so they're useful, and they really were a moment in time when they were great. And I think that heating problems are still a problem on the newer ones, in my opinion. You get too many of them packed together. We always had heating problems. Like we had to take, for the spherical rigs, we had to take the batteries out and power them through through the USB because the battery would get too hot and they just shut down. So they've never been, they've been really good at what they do, and they tried to expand to other markets, and they've not been successful because it's really painful to use it for anything other than what they're designed to be used for. And their heyday has gone. Like it's still a useful camera, still a good camera. You can still use it in a lot of things, but the heights that they were at maybe 10 years ago, they're probably not going to get back to.
Mine are so old that literally they didn't have the screen on the back. That was a separate module you had to buy and snap it on in order to see anything other than the tiny little postage stamp menu on the front, which was not an easy thing to program with. Chris, you had something to say?
No, can't hear you, Chris.
You're muted.
Pass. I forgot what I was going to say. I was too entertained by everything else.
Okay. And Sky, were you into this?
Well,
did we skip you?
No, yes. And Chris, to your point, on my GoPro, I was able to connect the app with the phone. It was much easier to get to and see and read. My son's, however, had his password, which of course he had forgotten. Resetting the password on a GoPro is not Herculean. It's not easy.
We like to call that non-trivial.
Non-trivial. And the 300 YouTube videos that I watched and all of the experts out there that tried to help me was not helpful.
Such fun. Well, let's move on. Next question.
David Paskin in Miami, Florida, here in our panel. I was fascinated yesterday by the suggestion of using Discord for comms. Wondering about the panel's thoughts.
Ronnie Settle's going to start us off.
So I've used Discord for comms once in an actual show. It worked great. It was not necessarily mission critical, but it was online. I had somebody at their house in their setup so they could hear what I was sending out and to make sure that it sounded good and in a setting that they were used to. And so we were talking back and forth on that. And of course, with compared to something like Unity, it's going to cost money. And we could have just texted. We could have just had a phone call or a FaceTime, but you're able to just mute your mic, unmute your mic, and you're able to add other people into your server, and they're able to also join in on the comms. And I've also used it before with some actual intercoms on site. The SolidCom M1 by Hollyland has a connection to it. The regular ClearCom connection, I can't remember. It's 4-wire, I think. Anyway. And then so I same kind of thing, but it was everybody on site, and then I had a Discord channel room where you could jump into the comms and jump into on site. I've used that before as well. So, I mean, it's not as robust, obviously, as Unity or something more because there's just one room, right? There's not multiple party lines, so that would be the limitation. But if that's all you need, then it works great.
Nice, Chris Fenwick.
David, I'd be careful. You have to weigh its functionality against your willingness to crash and burn. It will work, and we John and I played with it early on in 2020, and you could do stuff. One of the things that you can do actually is you can drag individuals. If you're the admin, you can drag people between rooms, and if you want to cluster a few people to let them talk about something and then bring them back to the main channel. They can't do that themselves. They might be able to, I don't want to say, but will understand that it's not the best solution. It's a very cheap solution. It might work, but if it's mission critical, I don't think I would recommend trying it.
Chris, did you find that using Discord for comms made it less stable than regular Discord? Because I don't push Discord very hard, but it seems really stable to me.
One thing to keep in mind, especially right now, is Discord has been having a lot of performance issues, mainly because of what's the thing, John?
ChatGPT.
Midjourney.
Yeah,
Midjourney.
A lot of people are using Discord as their canvas or a place to push all their Midjourney stuff to. So it's just getting hammered right now. And I think John even said it's gone down. The other day, it went down like 3 times or something. So there's another reason to stick with, stay in your lane and use an actual comm.
Sean, you had some thoughts about this?
The gentleman from California articulated that quite well. I yield my time.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, you can use anything as a general. I mean, you can all call a number. We used to use GoToMeeting when we first got started, where we just all call in and you just had, GoToMeeting was a great one. It was very inexpensive, and we could just get everybody to give everybody a number or put it on their computer or whatever, and that worked fine. As soon as you start doing as soon as you start to scale it all, you very quickly want to get out of one PL, one party line. So you want to have multiple party. You don't want because here's the problem: as soon as you want to start talking to people in their ear, you can't. You now need more party lines. And you need directs and you need other things like that. And so so it starts to get painful almost immediately to have one single bridge. And you see this in broadcast, because broadcasters, what they'll do is they'll have their truck will have 24 PLs and 48 directs and all this other stuff for their show, and they put everybody on the outside, like if the producer somewhere else on a bridge. And a bridge is just, there's one phone connector that goes in as one channel, and everybody's on that, and you really get to feel the chaos of that when you sit in that area. And so once you get good at using PLs, when I first did my first comms, I was like, I don't know they were like, well, how many channels do you want? I'm like, well, why would you need more than one? I was like, it was literally that's how it always begins, is why would you need one? As soon as you're on a show with 4 PLs or 6 PLs or 8 PLs, or, for me, Unity, I just feel like I'm being bound, with bound with leather, because it's just, I'm so used to having 8 to 12 PLs and buttons that are every person, and not having to have multiple pages and not that stupid round thing. And so the thing is that, you get used to like a real comm system, and even Unity can be very contained, format. We use it because it's inexpensive. But it's not, but as soon as the problem is always knowing what is on the other side of the hill, that there's something a lot more robust. But Unity is a big jump up from using a single channel, and not very expensive. I would definitely use that before I use Discord on anything that mattered at all. For fun stuff, you might do Discord, and I might just have someone call into it. I mean, you can do it on an iPhone just by doing multi-party phone call, like if you wanted to. But a GoToMeeting, Discord, all those things could do what you're trying to do. Or Zoom. We've used Zoom as comms. Literally just put, you can technically have, build multiple rooms. We've done this where you build multiple rooms and people go into the room that they want to talk about something with somebody. So the producers are all in one room and somebody else is in another room. We do that when we have people who don't want to install anything other than Zoom. We just create like a little set of Zoom rooms that the producers can go in here and the talent can go in here and and they can all just go in and talk amongst themselves. So you can build very, very crude PLs in Zoom as well. I would probably use Zoom over Discord any day of the week. Chris?
Yeah, that's a good idea, Alex. There's also a feature in Zoom where you can do an all call to all breakout rooms, which could be very handy. And I just did a show. I had to actually leave this chair. Hated it. Had to drive across the bay. Hated it more. Go to a studio. Awful. I actually set up a web camera over my shoulder so that the producer in Florida could see the console and could see when like my hands were going to the switcher, so she felt more comfortable that I was actually working. Made her happy.
And Mitch Hill. Oh, I'm sorry, Mitch. Oh, Alex,
all I was going to say is that so to build on Chris's thing there, comment there, is that when we want to make people feel comfortable too, is a lot of times we pump a bunch of things into one Zoom room, so the producer can go in there. They can see the show in one of them. They can see an overhead behind our shoulders to see another one. They can see sometimes a witness camera from the studio. They can see oftentimes we send our multi-views from our switcher into the Zoom room. So there might be 4 or 5 little windows that are going on there, and they can pin we explain to them how to pin things, and they can just pin any one that they want to look at. And that is in some cases a better experience for folks than even having comms. Is just being able to see. And sometimes they're on comms, they're on Unity comms, but they're looking at all these windows, and it really does make them feel a lot more like they're there, and that they're able to see what's going on.
That makes sense. And Mitch?
I'd like to see a second hour with the Mac Daddy ClearComm and maybe the newcomer Telos, and start deciding whether or not one is better than the other for our use.
Yeah, I don't know if I describe Telos as a newcomer. They've been around for a long, long time.
Well,
I'd also like to point out that in the early portions of my career, I did a lot of, like, hey,
yelling. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, we've been on this a while. Next question.
Next one in from Douglas Carmichael. It concerns me that Zoom would require a credit card on file to use original sound. Does that mean that I'll have to pay per month to use it?
Jason?
No, not necessarily, unless they're, preloading for something that has yet to be announced. But by itself, no.
Yeah, in my experience, often they ask for a credit card. They want to make sure that you're not a kid coming in just to mess things up. That's one of the gatekeeper functions of some things sometimes. Alex?
Yeah, and we don't know yet what the deal is there. So let's just do some more research and try to establish that before we get too worried about it.
Okay, next question.
And I have a question. Can Alex give us another HDR review of the assembled panelist?
Alex, are you set up for it?
I think so. Hold on. The easiest way to do that is to put us all into the whole multi-view. Like just show us the gallery here.
Is it gallery?
Then I
Is
can
the
look.
word we're looking for? Gallery?
So can we call for the back end to give us gallery view as the show? There you go.
And then I need it for a couple seconds. So I'm a little behind because of course we're streaming. And I just deleted what I needed out of there. So I'm gonna look at this for a second. So I'm gonna look at it on my phone and try to do the best I can. Oh my goodness. Let's see here. I just
HDR review live.
All right. Yeah, I mean we'll do more about do more of this in a more organized way. I would say that everyone's looking pretty good today. I think that I've also been making some adjustments on the back end, but you have to look at it yourself. It's going to be hard for us to break this all down, on the show. I thought I could, but it's really hard to do on my phone. And when you asked, I tried to look at it on my iPad, and
Can you explain what
Alex,
you were
do you have
trying to
an do you have
what
an
I was
opinion?
trying to do is get my iPad to pop up because I can look at it on my iPad easily, the HDR on my iPad because it's streaming to YouTube in HDR. And so we have tests for those of you watching wondering what the heck we're talking about. We're testing HDR in YouTube. And next week we'll start testing 5.1. We're not posting it anywhere. It's unlisted, but it's just for me to look at and see like, how is this going? What I can tell you is with just the change in the black levels, in the FSHDR just by itself, I think that the HDR, anybody who's got a relatively new iPhone or iPad can look at the link that I put into the Makana. I think it looks dramatically better than the regular one, just by it, without any, with just a little bit of changes. And then what we're going to do is you might have seen David go really dark and bright right before the show started or before it started streaming. It's because I'm starting to get into the color correction because everyone in this panel is going through a color corrector now. We're not color correcting anything yet, but we're working with the development team so that I'll get a list of who's where on those, on those FSHDRs. And I can go in and say, well, we'll bring David's black levels up a little bit, or we'll move the thing around. So I can color correct every single person in this panel, but I don't know who they are right now. I have to guess. And so I have to kind of go through and just move it back and forth. And so we're going to work on that. Starting next week, you'll probably see us start to do that every show. And I'll either get a list or I'll be here at 6:30. And when people are doing mic checks, figure out who's who and write things down. But then I can start color correcting everybody. The next step is for us to do the same thing with people's microphones. So we'll have individual feeds from that, and we'll be able to first sync everybody so that their sync is pretty perfect. The second thing is for us to be able to add EQ, do other things like that, and be able to make it work. The third thing is being able to let everybody just leave their mics open, and then we manage that on our end. And then the fourth thing is to be able to do auto switching so that we're switching based on who's talking. So we take over the active speaker so that we can do fine tuning. All of that's going to take a couple months. so it's going to be, but as we do that, we're going to be able to create a show that you couldn't get close to, with the vanilla version of what's out there. And so that's part of the process of kind of up-resing the whole show. As we go forward. So HDR, what we're shooting for is HDR 5.1 in 4K. And the 4K seems extravagant, except that is that when you see the multi-views of us, it looks really, really good because all of us are at full res, at 4K because we're smaller in frame. And so it looks amazing when you look at the 4K super sources. In addition to that, when we show 4K HDR surround footage into the show, if you're watching on YouTube, when that happens in a couple of weeks, we'll start testing that. When we plumb that into the show, like, hey, we're going to do a playback, and we play it in, and it's HDR and 4K and surround, then that footage will look amazing, and so we'll look better, and that footage will jump out. And so the goal is to be able to have an HDR pipeline where we fit in, we look normal, but we can do playback and other things at high dynamic range.
Mitchell, you had a question?
Yeah, actually, for Alex, is there any advantage to shooting 4K into your ATEM, having it downsampled,
A
the
little.
1080, and
A
it
little.
coming
I
out?
mean, you're oversampling, so everything's
Yep.
always going to be a little bit better if you're doing 4K into it. I know that when we do green screen, a lot of times we like to green screen at 4K and then go down to 1080p because it gives us most of our signals are 422, and it gives us the really the oversampling that we need to get an effective 444 key out of that process. So there is some advantage to that. It's not a massive advantage right now, but especially going through Zoom to get to us. And again, we're one of the hardest things about HDR and surround is that people do an event and they all get ramped up to it, and it takes they do 3 events a year or 5 events a year in HDR and surround. Our goal is to do it every day because we'll get really good at it. So the goal is that we'll keep on giving people updates, every couple of weeks or every couple of months as we go through this. But the goal is that we'll be doing 5.1 HDR10 to YouTube with, and then we'll be doing eventually Atmos and Vision to its own player. And there's just nobody else doing that every day in the world. Like nobody do. Like I work on this. There's nobody doing that every day. So right now, and so what we want to do is get to a point where we don't even think about it. Like we just know how it works. We know what it looks like, and we'll all learn about how to do that together. And it'll create a bunch of it's creating a bunch of problems, and it will create more problems, but we'll learn it and then be able to teach other people how to do it, and all of us will know how to do it. So that's the goal. I know it sounds crazy, but it's an interesting problem. And if we do it every day, we'll have a group of people, hundreds of people eventually, that can go out and show other people how to do it or get hired to be consultants because we know exactly how all of that works. It also means we can do training and in Vision and Atmos, or training in 5.1 and HDR10. And I haven't seen anybody do that in the world. So we want to do a training class. I can show you what Atmos or show you what HDR10 looks like in HDR, but show you that what everyone always says is here's what HDR kind of looks like in 100 nits. And then we make one darker that says this is SDR. But now we're going to be able to say this is 1,000 nits, this is 100 nits. Like you can see both of those, and that's going to be a different experience when we start doing more training in HDR and surround. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be fun.
Next question.
From Chris Fenwick in Emeryville, California. Are there tricks to making screen sharing work more reliable in Zoom ISO? Last night, I discovered that active screen share works more often.
Chris, can you tell us a little more about the circumstances and what you were setting up and what didn't work?
Yeah, I'm watching Alex in HDR on a delay. So the deal is with the screen ISO under mode, by default, you probably pick participant, which means on that ISO channel, you can select which person you want to push out that output. But you can also choose, hold on, let me change my mouse one second. You can also choose the screen share, and it doesn't work really reliably. Like sometimes it works, and when it does, it's awesome. But if it's not working, I mean, it's a nightmare. Like reboot, turn off the machine, relaunch ISO. But last night I noticed under that list, that pop-down list of choices, you have participant, screen share, active speaker spotlight, and also active screen share. And when I selected active screen share, it seemed to be much more reliable and actually worked. And I think what that means is maybe multiple people can be sharing screens and whoever talks, but if only one person is sharing a screen, then it appears to stay on that. But I was just wondering if anybody knew any tricks to making it more reliable, and I can see from Mukana.
Is there a difference in, is there a reason you wouldn't use active screen share all the time?
Well, I think it would seem, if I'm understanding the minds of Liminal, that screen share would be the thing to choose. I don't see a problem in using active screen share, and it seems like it's the best choice since it's actually working more reliably.
Well, yeah, because you can only screen share one thing, I think one thing at a time in most events. in most things. So I'm curious what's the difference between the two? No, this is an interesting problem because, and we'll bring it up to the folks that need to be chatted with about it. But yeah, I don't know why you would, if you can only actively screen share one thing at a time, because I think as soon as you start trying to screen share something that it kicks the other person off, it can only do one at a time. So why there would be a screen share and an active screen share is a conundrum.
I wonder if there's a piece where somebody who's doing the active screen share thing and coughs or something like that, it would pull it to them. Maybe it just focuses it on.
It's active screen share. It's not active camera.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So something we'll have to keep on researching.
Good question. We'll continue to look into it. Next question.
And from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Tony asks, how do I bring in Mimo Call for a Zoom meeting and Mimo Live event?
Alex is going to help us out here.
Yeah, have them call into Zoom. I'm sorry. I don't know why you would use a Mimo Call when you could use Zoom to do that and then feed that back in. That's the part that I would be confused by. And I admit that I tend to be very modal. Like if I decide that everything's going to be, my intercommunication, my editing is happening in one of these editing packages, whether it's Mimo Live is the one I primarily use, but I don't think I would be using the Zoom and delivering Zoom via, whatever I'm going to do back to Mimo, not a Mimo Call back to Zoom. If you wanted to do that, you could probably do it with loopback. So you would create an output and tell Mimo go out to that output, and then send that into via loopback. You'd send it back into Zoom and give Zoom and what you do is if you had your own people talking, you could go into screen share, you go to the advanced into computer and say add computer audio and set that computer audio to the device you created in loopback so that you're going out of Mimo Live into loopback and then what it'll do is it'll go in there. Now remember, it doesn't have any of the tools that you would have, like it's not going to cut between people or anything else, but it will give you clean audio as a separate audio feed from the people that are in Zoom, if that's what you're trying to do. But generally, I manage all the calls in Zoom, audio or video.
David, you had a thought?
I don't know about Tony's specific use case, but I can imagine, unless you are using, if I want to grab someone from Zoom, maybe using Zoom ISO, bring them into Mimo Live or Ecamm so that I can then apply lower thirds or do all this other stuff and then send them back into a Zoom meeting, then I have to have two separate Zoom meetings running, and there's a lot of work there. It may be the best route to go, but there's a lot of work there. As opposed to if someone just calls into Ecamm or Mimo Live, I can do all the production and then just send that once into Zoom.
Or a breakout room. You can have everybody go to a breakout room. You do the production out of there. And that's what we do a lot. We do a lot of pushing people into a breakout room. Now, we usually use separate meetings. And the reason we do that is because the meeting controls may be different. So I may be going into a webinar, or I may go into a meeting with a password, or I may have all kinds of other things that I'm doing in a meeting that I want the participants, the viewers, to see. Usually with the guests, I want them to not have to do anything. So I want to take off. I want to put them in a waiting room, and I want to take away the password and the require to log in, so that they just hit a button and they immediately go into where they need to go. And then I move them in. And the reason we move them into a breakout room from there is specifically so that if someone random goes into that room, they don't jump into our show. So we put them in a breakout room from there. So it's easy for them to get into, but I still have to move them into the room that I need them in. That's what we do here for this show too. I mean, there's a couple rooms that I think you get moved through to get to the host. This show that people are watching, if you don't know how the mechanics work, we're in a different meeting than you are. Like if you're in Zoom right now watching, we're in a different meeting, and we're being piped into your meeting. And I highly recommend either using breakout rooms or using a separate meeting to do that. And I do think that if you're trying to have any kind of interaction, things get pretty convoluted pretty quickly. And Zoom is much better built for audio and video than in my opinion, most of the editing apps.
David, do you have a follow-up?
I agree 100%. I think the persistent challenge with having your talent in a different room or a different breakout room or a different meeting is the lack of access to chat and Q&A and things like that, unless you're using a tool like Mukana,
Right.
which most people don't use.
Right.
But for most people who are living in the Zoomiverse, who rely on chat and Q&A, not having everybody in this, it's a challenge. That's all.
Yeah. And the way to think about that is something like Zoom OSC that's going to go in and grab, again, this isn't the vanilla version, but the non-vanilla version is to use something like Zoom OSC to go grab that chat and go grab, it's just displaying. You generally don't want, in my opinion, you don't want most hosts to be interacting with the chat directly or the Q&A directly. You want to create some in between, someone else managing that for them so that they get to see what they need to see. The big challenge for a host, that is why we have so many tools inside of Mukana to do this, is because being present is really hard to do be live. And when you let the host look at the chat, you get a lot of this. And we're gonna now look at David. And there's, I guess some people like that. I find it to be very unprofessional. So I don't want the host looking at that. I want things delivered to the host. The panelists here have a way to do that. We have teleprompter views and many things that can be done to some degree without Mukana, in Google Docs. Like literally before we had Mukana, we literally put Google Docs up in front of someone. There's a screen under the window that we just put the questions that they need to answer up there and threw that in there. But I wouldn't have your talent looking directly at the chat. And there's a whole bunch of reasons not to do that. One is that they get distracted. Two is if the chat goes south, it really ruins the experience for the host. If people get mean or they get upset or they start picking at something, the host can get derailed, and you don't want them to see the raw feed, pretty much ever. That's usually, that's what we try to do is we do it here because we're thick skinned. But the first thing that I do when I get into an event is remove the host from seeing any kind of raw feed of the text from the viewers, especially on a larger event, because every large event dredges up, the online Balrog, pretty quickly as soon as you get to a big event.
So let's move on. Next question.
Xander Snell in Miami Beach, Florida. What is your favorite TV for budget multi-view monitoring? Do you use the audio from the TV at the TD or technical director's position?
Courtney.
I use a lot of these. TCL makes a 55-inch, which is kind of the sweet spot. You can get them for like $253 on eBay or about $300 and some dollars on Amazon. They're a 4K panel. They support HDR. They're great for multi-view because they're a 4K panel. If you have a 4K multi-view or a 1080p, they work just fine. The speakers, I wouldn't use the speakers for monitoring because it's difficult to control them because you have to use a remote. We usually use a HDMI audio extractor. Just put that in line if you have audio running down your multi-view, and extract the audio out to a pair of RCA connectors or whatever, and feed them into amplified speakers that you have a remote audio control knob on, so you can easily grab the audio monitor to turn it up or down as needed. But those work pretty well. Unfortunately, they have the Roku interface built in, but you're probably not going to be using that too much. And it does do AirPlay if you have to hook up an Apple, stream to it over an Apple device or throw a video to it from a portable phone or something. So in a pinch, it can do that as well.
Let's go to the next question.
Sky Gleason, Seattle, Washington, and here in our panel, I got to put a Sigma Cinema lens on my Blackmagic Cinema 6K. If the glass is the same on the inside, why would I want a cinema housing rather than Sigma's art lens?
Sky's going to start us out here.
I just wanted to thank Guy Cochran for the opportunity yesterday. The Sigma rep came to his facility, and I'm reasonably close, so I jumped in the car and ran up there and was able to test it. It's butter. Oh, it's so pretty. But I am curious, the price difference and all of the other functionalities. Alex, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, you want to explain
why would
the
I want
difference,
that?
Alex?
I don't know that lens, but I can tell you, generally, cinema lenses are able to back focus. So they're parafocal, so you can basically back focus the lens so that you can zoom through it. So a regular lens is not going to if it doesn't have back focus, you can't go from wide to close up on the same focus, right? The focus is changing as you're moving. So you got to be able to have that back focus. The second thing is usually you have gears on the outside of the cinema lens. And so that way you can put motors on it, or you can put follow focus. So usually the big things that change are the ability to back focus, if it wasn't there or not, and the gears on the outside of the lens. And usually the markings on the lens are slightly different that are built for follow focus and those types of things, as opposed to it. You can get away with film, but again, the problem you end up with is your regular still lenses are going to be changing in focus, and so that you're constantly moving out and then refocusing. You can't do these, kind of. Now, people who mostly use prime say that's what you should do anyway. So anyway, so it's that you shouldn't be doing that while you shouldn't be zooming while you're rolling. That's my brother would tell you that over and over again. Like, why would you do that? Why would you move the lens, the focal length while you're actually shooting it? He said my zoom is my feet. So anyway, that's another thing.
I've also noticed that sometimes on cinema lenses, the focus range is much bigger. On a still photography lens, there will be a full out to full in there. On a cinema lens, it'll be more than that. It's designed for that kind of gear operation. Let's go to the next question.
David Paskin, Miami, Florida, asking, taking a plunge into Bumblebee IFBs, what model should I get?
David Paskin.
I'm not answering my own question. I just want to add, and forgive me if this sounds silly, but curly or straight?
Alex, what do you think?
In addition to model.
Straight. Get straight. Don't get curly. It gets caught up in everything. So you don't want to, don't get curly. We got lots of curly ones for a while with other in-ears, and they'll get kinked and they'll get caught up in things, and just get straight. So straight lines there. It does pull a little bit, but it's worth it because, man, the curly ones are just a nightmare. So I like both ears. That's going to be really up to other people. You can the Bumblebees have versions that are opened and versions that are closed. So I don't like to hear anything while I'm on a show. I don't even like people to talk when I'm on the phone. So I'm, it's hard enough for me to pay attention to everything that's going on. So I like it to be just closed off. They're really good. I will say that I don't use them on a day-to-day basis on this show, not because they're more expensive and I'm trying to keep them in good shape, but because the audio isn't as good as these SC10s, in the Linsoles that I use. I did, by the way, we talked about the $27 Linsoles, no high end, just in case you're wondering. I bought them, no high end. Like it sounds like underwater compared to the regular ones. Anyway, so remember the in-ear makes less expensive ones that look almost identical to the Bumblebee. People think that they're the same manufacturer. I'm not sure that that's the case. But I, there's the in-ear and then there's the Bumblebees. I love the Bumblebees. And when I'm doing things that high profile events, and especially we like to use them for actual comms at times. So we've used them in our comm systems, the Bumblebees. And they, I know this will sound crazy, but clients notice that you have these crazy, really thin little things when you're using them for IFBs. People come up and talk to you about it. And I've actually paid for all of the cost of all of those by a couple jobs that I got because literally someone came up and asked what was in my ear. So they're worth it. Again, they're very good for very low profile. They're not, the quality on any of them is not nearly as high as these $50 Linsoles. I had to literally take these out. I think people were here when I did it. I put these in and I was hearing so much noise that I was creating on my desk. And I found it so distracting that I had to take them out because I couldn't even do the show. And I had been using Bumblebees for a while. So you want to know that you're not going to hear as much. They're really just for the voice, but you won't hear all the other stuff around it. And I think that that's valuable. So on a regular day-to-day basis, I use the Linsoles for a handful of events that are high profile, especially if I'm actually in a real world environment. I use the Bumblebees.
And I am an in-ear, and I'm a curly guy. The back of that, and it's because it never pops out. I have all sorts of trouble with visible wires unless I'm using those spring-loaded ones. The good ones, you learn how to rig them right. Let's move on.
Would you be willing to put a link in Mukana to your Linsoles?
Yeah, I'll put it in Mukana.
All right, let's move on to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael's here asking, many U.S. federal agencies have bug bounty programs that pay security researchers, even private citizens, for verified vulnerabilities in public-facing applications. How do said researchers learn their craft?
Courtney Gooden, and we have a lot of questions here, so see if you can get through it pretty quickly here.
It's called pen testing, which is short for penetration testing. And here's a good site called Imperva, and I'll put a link to it in the chat that talks about all the different stages of doing penetration testing as a business, which is what you're talking about.
Jason, you have a quick comment to add?
Yeah, they learn by doing.
Yeah, fair enough. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, asking, in talking to a friend last night from our local tourism board, in-motion broadcasting was discussed, and he wants a quote on broadcasting their 24-mile bike ride. Other than it being a long stream, any big gotchas using Starlink in motion?
Courtney. Oops, I'm not here.
Sorry, you caught me typing. I wouldn't know how to quote this, and I'm not sure how you would, if you have a strap that Starlink in motion to the back of a bike or something. I guess you would follow along in a motorhome would be the best way to go, and then maybe have mobile cameras mounted on several of the bikers that are transmitting over Wi-Fi or microwave back to the mobile home, which is chasing them along. Otherwise, I wouldn't know how to bid something like that.
Alex, you have some experience with Starlink. You think it'll work?
The Starlink isn't your problem on a 24-mile ride. It's getting all the connections back. So you're not going to use Starlink for that. You need a wireless pickups. Now, the thing you have to decide is whether you're covering the entire route or covering specific routes. A lot of times we use wireless, either point-to-point or RF. But we have to basically run fiber to those locations. You decide some races, you think that you're seeing everything. You're really just seeing where they can get transmission. So you know, as the lead breaks up, you know, that happens. That starts to happen there. But you can get things that'll go a very long distance. Then you have to put receivers in build a mesh of receivers, and then you have those things go through. But a lot of times you don't cover the entire event unless you have the budget. And we've definitely done races where we have the budget of a lot. But you still have to pick and choose your battles there related to that.
Next question.
Next one in for Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Anyone tried, and there's a link to a bird dog video wall overview. Since it works with the bird dog play, it seems like a cost-effective solution.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the website real quick. It looks like it's $495, but it doesn't, a powerful way to display NDI and NDI HX videos across multiple screens. I've never tried to use it, but it sounds like interesting technology for those of you who are looking for this kind of thing. Hopefully, next time somebody will have some direct experience with it. Let's go to the next question.
Arshid Trivedi from Daytona Beach. Did anyone get a chance to watch the Samsung event yesterday? What were your production thoughts to their presentation?
Yeah, I don't think anybody that I know has been talking about it. Alex, did you get some sense of what they did?
I didn't get to see it. It'd be good. This is definitely a place to put links because we can't find it quick enough for the show if it's after 7 a.m. So I'm not sure. I probably would have looked at it if I'd found the link to it. The thing that I always expect from Samsung is that there'll be a lot of LED problems in the background, moire and so on and so forth. I don't know if they did that or not this time, but that's usually common on a Samsung event. They're really into LEDs and they don't usually look very good. It makes me so upset. I only usually watch a couple minutes of Samsung events because the moire makes me so crazy that I'm like, I just got to walk away. But 200 megapixel camera, I don't know how good those pixels are, but 200 megapixel.
There you go. Burned by moire. Next question.
Next question from Hazma Kashar in Cape Town, South Africa. Starting the Zoom ISO engine, the recording icon in Zoom disappears. Can I do both? Record the event in the cloud and use Zoom ISO. The recording icon in Zoom appears as soon as I stop the Zoom ISO engine. Should I record from joining the meeting and record?
Yeah, I wonder if just they figure that the bandwidth is too much to do both at the same time. I might be wrong about that. Alex, what are your thoughts?
You can't record if you're recording in the cloud. You cannot record. You cannot get it Zoom ISO to do that as well at the same time. So you have to have, it's one or the other. And I think the assumption is that if you're using Zoom ISO, you could record the program right from something local. So I would probably look at that, but you can't. I don't think you can record in the cloud and use Zoom ISO at the same time.
Makes sense. Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin asking Alex, Memo Live question, is there a possibility to get a visual preview of a complete layer set before recalling it to live?
Alex, thoughts?
I think that what you're talking about, I think that you should be able to select that layer before it goes live, but I'm not 100% sure. I think that you have to It's not a behavior that I use, because I'm cutting things pretty manually the way I use Memo. So I don't. We'd have to take a look at that. But we are going to be doing some Memo labs in the near future. So we'll probably have someone who knows a lot about it in the lab. So stay tuned for that. A couple of us are gonna kind of hack through. It's not going to be organized the way that David does eCam. It'll be mostly a bunch of us jumping on and trading notes. So it'll just be like, here's what I do. Here's what I do. Why doesn't this work? There's going to be a lot of that coming up in the near future.
Let's go to the next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What features should you look for in a USB XLR combo microphone?
And we don't have much time left. I'd like to get through this in a minute or so. We're about down to that to get through all our questions. So within 15 seconds or so, let's start with Jason.
Cynic in me says, show me one that I want to use and I'll tell you.
Sky Gleason.
My MV7 has both. Just be wary that you can snag the USB-C cable on the bottom and you can bend it. Ask me how I know.
Courtney Gooden.
Look for something that has a local headphone out on the bottom of it so that if you're using it as a USB microphone, you get a local non-delayed feed-through into your headphones at an adjustable level for that headphone feed. And most of these are dynamic mics. Make sure the dynamic XLR output has enough signal gain to drive the mixer that you're plugging it into if you're using it that way.
Mitch, can you wind us up in 10 seconds?
Yeah, volume.
There you go. Less than 10 seconds. Well done. Next question.
Next question from Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Has anyone tried out a graphics live? Looks interesting for cloud production.
I have not, and I don't know anybody who's talked about it. I haven't seen anything on the web. That doesn't mean it's bad. I just have to take a look at it. David Paskin has a quick
talk. I watched the rollout. It's connected to H2R graphics, or it's built on the same sort of platform. It's essentially gives you a URL that you can then grab and put over as an alpha overlay on top of in Mimo Live or vMix or eCam. It's pretty basic at this point, but it looks pretty cool.
Alex?
Yeah, we'll get him on. We should get John on. We haven't had John on for quite some time. So let's get if someone's watching in the background, let's get John on. All right.
Excellent. Go right to the source. We'll know everything if he's here. Next question.
Robin Cutshaw, Atlanta, Georgia, asking, what is your inner ear monitor plugged into? How do you route different sources to them?
Mitch, take it away.
I'm lucky enough to have a Studio Tech 205. Here it is. And because it's Dante, I can send pretty much anything that's on the network into it.
Alex?
Yeah, I'm actually, my in-ears are going straight out of my mix pre, so I'm able to hear that. That now my mic goes through the studio, my Studio Technologies Model 205 as well. So what's nice is when I mute, I suddenly don't hear myself, which means I know I'm on mute. If I hear myself, I know that I'm coming to you live. So it allows me to know what's going on.
Courtney, real quick.
Well, real quick, mine's plugged into the Rodecaster Pro 2, and I wish I had the latest version of the firmware, which it will refuse to upgrade to.
Sorry about that. And I'm using Loopback just to pull it right off my Universal Audio Apollo feed, and the folks in the back end are helping me do that. So let's go to the last question here.
Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. With the coming changes to YouTube Shorts, I propose content-rich creation recording at 2x speed, no background music, no cheesy brandy documenting, and links in single frames near chapter markers, set up for multi-device viewing and listening.
That sounds like an interesting approach, Alex.
I think that would be difficult. I don't know if people would. You'd have to do one to have us see whether that actually made any sense at all. So I think that the real challenge with shorts is the best way to deal with shorts and TikTok is to look at what everybody else is doing. If you're not in that flow of doing that, it has to be considerably better than what everybody else is doing. So a lot of times I spend a lot of time looking at shorts, and I've spent a lot of time looking at TikToks, and the what is cool takes, it keeps moving, keeps wandering around of what that looks like and what the algorithms want and what you are putting out. And so you have to pay a lot of attention to that. You can get creative, but usually creative just means you're going to put a lot of work into something that 4 people are going to watch.
Yeah, sometimes those algorithms and things like that have another purpose behind the thing. So I think Alex is exactly right. You probably could do that, but I'm not sure if you would be maximizing the ability of the shorts to pull focus and viewers if that's what you want. So thank you, everybody, for great answers here in our first hour. We're just about 5 seconds away from the top of the hour, and we're going to move to our special guest. So everybody, thank you again for all the answers. And now let us welcome to the panel our guest. This is going to be exciting. We've been preparing for this for a long time. Chris is, oh, wait a second. I lost a note here. Good heavens. Chris, introduce yourself.
So I'm Chris Sabato. My official title is Assistant Athletic Director for Media at Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. We're a small private liberal arts college, Division III school. So what I do basically within the athletics department is anything technical or creative kind of falls under my purview. And so I do all our social media, I do our graphic design, and I do all our web streaming. And over the past 10 years, it's increased tenfold for what we do and what our competitors are doing. But our budget doesn't, and the people that we get to help in those matters doesn't. And so what I do a lot of is finding creative ways to make our broadcast better, to add bells and whistles without adding a ton of cost and without people. And so that's kind of what I'm here to talk about.
Thank you, Chris. And I know that you've been a big presence in After Hours talking about all this stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about how you get your start in the area that we're working in now?
I got a degree in electrical engineering, and after I graduated from college, I naturally became a track and field coach, natural progression. And so I was a track and field coach for 11 years. And during that time, it kind of started out, I was coaching and doing some of this other stuff for our track program. And as it went on, it became coaching and doing stuff for other teams in the program to no longer coaching and doing all this stuff for other teams. And so it's just over the course of about 11 years, a transition into, media type stuff. With my engineering background, like trying to make things work together, to me it's exciting and it's fun. And I've been fortunate enough to have bosses that were supportive of kind of me just kind of going my own route and finding my own path and developing things that I thought were valuable.
So was it the coaching that led you into thinking that you wanted to work in the sports side of this production? And what have you discovered about how this works in the real world of what you practice now?
So I was a college athlete, and so that got me into coaching, and I was a track and field athlete, and track and field is one of the sports that doesn't get as much love as football or basketball. And so I was always trying to up the game. What can we do for our sport? And so that kind of hooked me into this kind of line of stuff. And then, once you're on the train, you just keep going.
In sports specifically, what things do you do now that maybe those in general production don't? What are some of the specialities of approaching a sports event? What's different about it?
The two big things for sports is really the replay aspect. Being able to show back something, right away is super important in sports. And there's a lot of data and graphics in sports, at least the way I do it. And, we've had whole second hours on the data and graphics in sports. And so I think those are two components that may not be as prevalent in, corporate work and stuff like that.
Yeah, probably not. But we talk a lot about them. Have you found systems? Has it evolved a lot so that it's easier today, or is it just as difficult as it was maybe when you got into the business?
It's gotten easier and cheaper, but with that it becomes more complex. And because you can do more, you do more, and the job doesn't get any easier; it just gets more.
Can you describe a little bit about what are the kinds of things you used to do as overlays and graphics in the early days, and what have you evolved into now? What can you do today that because of this easier equipment that you couldn't do before?
So when we first started, the first really streams that I did were we streamed swimming and volleyball with a Logitech C920 plugged into a camera and Wirecast. That was it. And then we gradually progressed. Like, well, we want a scoreboard on there. And so, Wirecast had some functionality where you could manually type, +1, and that became cumbersome. And so then we got to the point where we could do a second camera and focus that camera just on the scoreboard and then cut it out so that, you could see just the digit. And then that got fancier where we would cut out just the digit and place that little digit into a graphic. And then it got to the point where we could do, live graphics. And, the first one we started with was with New Blue, and we used New Blue Title Live for a while. And that was pretty revolutionary for us to be able to get, live data on our stream pretty easily and fairly affordable.
I'm interested also, the NC2A, so you're probably covering local games around there. What is your audience geographic profile? Are you making a show just for the local people, or are you making a show that goes out on the internet to the entire world so that people interested in those teams can follow that?
Right. So we're a small school, and I work for the school, so I don't cover anything but our events. And our primary demographics are, are the parents of our student athletes, the alumni, and recruits. And probably in that order is the numbers that we get. Most of its parents, and maybe some friends of student athletes, stuff like that. Our broadcasts aren't big. Anyone can watch them, but they don't draw huge numbers. I think our football games average about 1,000, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000, depends on who we're playing. Most of our other sports are probably around 300 uniques per event. So not huge numbers. Our tennis broadcasts are, tens. But that's one of those things where the target audience is just so much smaller. But in small college athletics, a lot of times we do things because it's the right thing to do, and not because not because of a financial decision. And
is your delivery 100% web, or do you have local broadcasters, local cable interface? It's just 100% web.
100% web. Yep.
Excellent. Yep. Excellent. So tell me, walk us through a little bit about what a typical shoot prep for you. So take us through either whatever you think would be more interesting, a week of prep for the show or just a day of the show. What would you normally encounter?
Yeah. So a lot of what I do is really, it's about managing equipment, and we've got a lot of things going on, and some weeks we'll have just one event, and other weeks we'll have 5. And so how can I distribute that equipment to make the most of it? And, during the winter season, basically basketball and swimming are kind of the only sports we have going. So those broadcasts end up being a little bit more because I have more equipment to pull from. In the spring when we've got, baseball, softball, lacrosse, tennis, all going at the same, possibly all literally going at the exact same time, that equipment gets spread out. And because of that, we can do less with it. So usually what I'm doing is looking at what we have going, and it's like, okay, can I move some equipment around? Can I add, can I take away? What do we need to do to get through this week? Depending on the sports we have going, sometimes it's an easy job, and sometimes it's, I'm pulling my hair out trying to make things work.
And you said something in your preview about one-man banding it. Do you have help at some times and you have to do it all by yourself at others? And how does that break out? What do you do if you've got 3 events, and is it just you?
Yeah, so it depends on the sport. One-man band is more of a general concept. Our most advanced broadcasts would be probably volleyball and basketball. And for those, it's a 2 to 3 man show. And so I'm the director, the replay, the audio, all that stuff. We'll have one camera operator and possibly a play-by-play. So for basketball, we'll have play-by-play. Volleyball, we probably wouldn't. And so that's it. And then for baseball and softball, sometimes it's a one-man show, sometimes it's a no-man show. And it's just, I start it, connect all the data feeds, and just let it do its thing. So, if we've got baseball, softball, and lacrosse going at the same time, baseball and softball broadcasts are basically going to be kind of a static camera with the data graphics, and that's kind of it. And it's unfortunate. I wish we could do more, but we we struggle with finding student work that are really interested in this type of thing. Willamette, a liberal arts college, and the workers I have, they're there for the same reason that they would get a job at the dining hall swiping cards. They just need a paycheck, and they're not looking to do this past the job. And so it's always a struggle to find help in that regard.
This is very interesting. A lot of things to think, but let's get into some of our questions from the audience, and we'll come back to some other topics afterwards. First question, Mitch.
From Ronnie Hafsoy in Tromsø, Norway. Ronnie asks, doing everything yourself, how do you listen to audio, program audio, intercom, remote audio, and streaming audio? 3 headsets, 1 headset with advanced mix, or what?
Sometimes it could be a challenge because it's such a small crew. We have comms, but we don't use it a lot because there's not a lot to be said. If I've got one manned camera, that camera basically needs to assume they're live the whole time. And there'll be times I cut away from them, but there's nothing. That camera is primarily a wide sweep camera. And so it needs to be a safe shot I can always cut to. And so I don't need to really be talking to them a ton, letting them know what I'm doing, because it's not going to change what they need to do.
Are these fixed or pan tilt zoom cameras that you can maybe move a shot over time?
So we had one pan tilt zoom that took a tumble. So now we have no pan tilt zooms. Most of our cameras are just static. We use a lot of, we use the Marshall POV cameras. We use a lot of those. We use a lot of the Ada NDI POV cameras. And then we have one JVC man camera mounted on rails, and the whole setup so that it's easily operatable.
And since you mentioned it, he mentioned remote audio in the questions. What do you do for audio? How do you approach that for these different events?
To me, audio is pretty important. And so I'm always trying to make sure we have good audio, make sure we have ambient audio, make sure we're bringing in, it's one of those things where if you have bad audio and good video, people are going to turn it off. And they won't the other way. So I'm always trying to make sure that our audio is good. Being a one-man shop, sometimes it doesn't work. I just had an incident, a couple weeks ago where somewhere in the chain, what I was monitoring sounded fine, but before it went to the stream, it got distorted, and I didn't catch that. And that's one of the things you deal with when you're working on shoestring budgets and just trying to get things out there, is that things fall through the cracks. And I try to not, but sometimes it happens.
I think Mitch has a question for you from here in the panel. Mitch?
Yeah, Chris, welcome aboard. It's always good to see you. And of course, I spent a lot of time with you on After Hours. Do you have a shot that you could show us what your operating position looks like so we can see all the integration and things you have going on?
Yeah, let me share my screen.
And so you're on premises at the university, correct?
Yeah, I'm at the university, and the control room is basically my office, and most of our broadcasts kind of happen, from my office. And this is an example of a week or two ago where we had a basketball game and a swim meet going on at the same time. And so I'm trying to manage both broadcasts. And I mean, you can see, down in the corner there, and this one here, and this one here, those are all for the swim broadcast, and everything else is for the basketball. And so this is a case where the basketball was kind of getting the priority, but I was also kind of monitoring what was happening on the swim meet and making sure that, the graphics were populating correctly, and the scoreboards were showing and all that.
Are those little Marshall cameras, and do you have them in a fixed position, or do you set them up and take them down for each meet?
So it depends. That's right. So this is an example. This is what I'm looking at for basketball. This is a screenshot of my computer, and you can see in the multi views, like this one and this one are both Marshall cameras, and the other, 2, 3 are Marshall cameras, and then 4, 5, and 6 are all Ada NDI cameras, and they're just fixed, and they're just right there. The Ada ones, they're NDI, and they just stay there until the end of the season. The Marshall ones get attached under the hoop, and I take those down at the end of the game.
I'm presuming there's no commentary during these events. So you just do you have like just ambient mics out at courtside and let that be the whole thing?
It depends. So for basketball, we have play-by-play person. And so we have that. We also have for basketball, there's 3 ambient mics. There's one underneath the table on the floor. There's one basically attached just underneath the hoop, so you can hear that whoosh when they hit the swoosh. And then we also bring in the PA announcers for the intros and stuff like that if we need to.
Excellent. That's a fascinating look. It looks like a really well-designed setup. Let's go to our next question.
From Kenneth Jones in Seattle, Washington, when you train your replacement, where will you start and how long will it take?
Chris,
it's funny. Nigel a couple days ago had mentioned like, don't make yourself irreplaceable. And I was like, oh, whoops, too late.
Yeah, Chris, and I think you're still screen sharing, so you might want to stop that so we can see you.
So the thing is, where I'm at and what I'm doing, if I go away, they just won't do it. They find it valuable and they love it. But I don't think they love it enough that if I went away, they would go to the effort to find someone to keep doing this kind of stuff. And sometimes it's a tough pill to swallow because it's like, oh, I'm building all this stuff. But it's all about resource allocation and with my skill set, I can do stuff. And I have a skill set that I don't think a lot of people have who work in my particular industry.
Absolutely. Next question.
Next question coming in from Ronnie Hofsoy in Tromsø, Norway. Ronnie asks, how do you record audio, separate, embedded, or multitrack? And what about sync to video? Do you prefer free running internal or house sync?
We don't do a ton with sync, mainly because most of our broadcast lip sync is not an issue. So it doesn't, if it's off a little, it doesn't matter because no one's ever going to notice. In terms of recording, everything is, there's no multi-track. There's nothing for editing later. It's all what's live is what it is. And, we're recording in MPEG-4 and it is what it is. And I don't have the capacity, storage wise and resources wise to do much more than that. And so it's one of those things where once the live stream is done, that's it. We save it and it is what it is. And there's no going back and editing or anything like that.
Fair enough. Next question.
Jesse Mills in San Francisco Bay Area. What brand and model of PTZs, pan-tilt zoom cameras, do you use and why?
The one that's no longer working. How
was
it?
No longer works was a PTZ optics. And the original reason we got it was well, basically for NDI is how we originally used it. And it was fine. It had, it did what it did. It's not a super great camera, but it for the cost, it was fine. If I had to go again, I'd probably be looking at, maybe some Panasonics.
Chris, how did you feel about it? Were you operating that camera remotely from your switching station at the remote location? And what was the experience like for you?
So when we originally bought that camera, we bought it for soccer and we did not have, there was no filming location. And so everything was flat. There was no bleachers. And so we bought it and put it on top of a 30-foot mast. And so basically that was how we did the soccer broadcast is the PTZ. And, it's not a great camera. So the following was not great. It was a little laggy, but again, for our audience and for what we were doing, it was good enough. Yeah.
Since you cover multiple sports, what would you say is the hardest of the sports that you have to cover to do? Is soccer tough because the field is so big, or are there other things that are more difficult?
Maybe baseball and softball. Baseball is hard a lot. Baseball and softball are both hard a lot of times because of sight lines. Trying to get a camera in a place that's not behind a chain link fence. It's also not linear. And so to do multiple cameras, you need to be all the way around the venue. And so for baseball and softball, when we can, we'll do a 2-camera shoot, which is one static camera just behind home plate that kind of covers the whole field, and then one at center field that's covering the pitcher and the batter. And just making that work is hard because they're 600 feet apart, and it's a lot of SDI, and that's not a simple process. And what I ended up doing for both softball and baseball in those cases is using the ADA NDI HX cameras over Ubiquiti point-to-point bridge, and so basically a wireless connection. That's what we've done in the past.
Makes sense. Courtney has a question from the panel.
Yeah, are there any PTZs or perhaps a 4K camera that has a 4K sensor and can zoom in and follow, using AI, follow the action on like soccer or basketball? Because usually everybody's headed to one end of the court or the other end of the court. And so if you mounted a camera like that, a 4K camera, a static 4K camera, it could just zoom in and do a 1080p window as it followed the action left and right.
So that's actually, that's a pretty popular thing. In small colleges and high schools, is there are these new specific cameras, and we have one at football and we have one in our basketball gym, where it's like in basketball, I think it's 3 cameras and it patches them all together. And so it covers the whole gym, and then it's AI that does a pan and scan inside that image. And it is great if you have nothing else to choose from. It gets confused a lot. In a basketball game, if the players are spread over the court, it gets confused as to where it needs to go. And timeouts are kind of comical because it doesn't know what to do, and it's just going up and down. And
if one of the players throws a Hail Mary pass to somebody at the other end of the court, then
you may miss it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of high schools that do it because they can spend whatever it is, $3,000-$4,000, plop it up on the wall, and then that's it. And it just streams out. It does its thing. Like I said, if you have nothing else, they're great. But we have one and we use it. It's just for practice. I would never use it for anything broadcast related.
Let's go to the next question.
Joaquin Matus from Imperial Valley, California. Do you ever look to broadcast NFL, NBA, MLB, Division I, NCAA to find inspiration for integrations or features you want to add to your broadcast? How do you compensate for that in terms of having a limited budget to carry out any of those new features?
Do they inspire you, or do they make you feel like you just wish you had that stuff?
Well, a little of both, really. But sometimes it's like I'll see something on a broadcast and be like, oh, I think we can do that. And, one of the things from the Olympics a couple of years ago, I was watching volleyball and they showed an overhead shot that was like directly over the volleyball court. And I'm thinking, I think we can do that. And so that was something that I saw in the Olympics and I implemented, and we had a shot that is right above our basketball and volleyball court. And I think provides a really unique shot that didn't take much to do, but there's a lot of things like that where I've seen, and it's like, oh, I'd like to do that, but we could never. And there's a lot of things where like, oh, I think maybe we can do something like that, and trying to find creative ways to integrate a lot of that stuff. And that's kind of segueing a little bit. That's where a lot of the data comes from. And I see these graphics and I was like, oh, I wish like we have that data is available. Why can't I show that on screen? And so, I've written a lot of custom Python programs that are basically extrapolating data and putting it in a way that I can then feed it into vMix and show all these custom graphics that we have.
I think a lot of people here would be interested in that, Chris. What sources do you use to pull stats for what's going on in the NC2A?
So in the NCAA, basically everyone has pretty similar stats situation. And so the stats are being generated by staff, and I'm basically getting an XML file with that stats, and then I'm parsing out that XML file and combining it with some other things to make our graphics look a certain way.
Does it come out of the NC2A offices, or do you subscribe to some sort of statistical feed or something like that?
No, it's something someone in our department sits at a computer and types stuff in, and that computer generates an XML file, and then from that computer it pushes it to my computer, where then I can take it.
Cool. Just wondered how they get there. I was wondering if maybe the colleges had gotten sophisticated enough to send out a data stream in near real time about what's happening.
I mean, the big schools that might be more of a thing. Most in the NCAA, most of the schools right now are using NCAA Live Stats, and that's owned by Genius, which is a huge betting company. And so that data is out there. And if you got the money, you can get access to it.
Makes sense. Next question.
Bob Sturdivant in San Antonio, Texas. Chris, with all of your automation, how do you handle software, firmware updates without crashing your whole system?
Very carefully. Software and firmware updates, for the most part, like my system's so fragile to begin with that if it's going to break, it's going to break. And so I'm not as leery about doing software and firmware updates. Most things, for me, the bigger concern is that some piece of code that I wrote runs across something that I was not anticipating and breaks in the middle of a stream. That's more of a real threat than the software stuff.
Fair enough. Next question.
Ronnie Hofsoy in Tromsø, Norway, asking, I guess you use a lot of automation like Companion. Would you share all your setups with the Office Hours crew? Joke aside, how are you using Companion in your setup? Or what other automation do you use?
Yeah, here I can show you a little bit more. Let's share screen again. And so this is my deck for basketball. And one of the things that I really have started taking advantage of with Stream Deck and Companion is this ability to do kind of a shift effect. And it's basically when you hold one button down, it changes the page, and you can press your button and it releases. Let me see if I can get an example of it here. And so, and you can see as I hold one button down, it changes the other buttons, and then I can press those. And when I release that button, it goes back to where it was. And one of the default kind of states in both Companion and the native Stream Deck software is this concept of like folders or pages. And I found it very cumbersome to get into a page to do something and then to get back where I was going. And so that's where this shift type feature to me just makes things so much quicker, in that I can hold it down, and as soon as I release it, I'm back to where I was, and I don't have to worry about navigating out of wherever I got myself into. And so I've got a handful of kind of pages like that on my Stream Deck, where I can just hold down a button and it pops up basically a sub menu that I can quickly access things.
And that looked really impressive. Don't tell me that when you held down that button and it turned red, you were switching one game, and when you hold down the button and it turned blue, you were on the other game.
No, I mean, I could do that, but no, that what that was doing is there's an away button and a home button. And when I click the away button, it will pop up the away team's roster on that left button. And so basically those are for showing like a player graphic. And so if I wanted to show, number 9 and the home team, I hold down the home button and click number 9, and then it pops up the graphic for that player. Wow, that's
really sophisticated construct.
Yeah. And if you can see on I don't know, it's kind of hard. So it's going to use white. On these buttons right here, you can see that there's actually a little number in the corner of those, and that's actually the score of the game. And so I wrote in my score bug processing engine, I added a feature so that as the score updates, it actually updates the button on the Stream Deck with what the score is. And that particular button is for my replay tagging. And so when I capture a replay and I want to tag what that replay is, I hit that button. So for example, I'll hit the away button, and it will tag it as an away event. and with the score at that point. And so then at some point later, if I need to go back and find something, I can find it really quickly because I have the score of the point where that replay was taken. And so to me, that's been super helpful too, is that kind of being able to hack the companion stuff and make it work more how I want it has been good.
How much time do you spend in your Python scripts to make all this stuff happen? Is it something that you're
too much?
Too much.
Like I said, I got a degree in engineering, and so I am happy to spend 4 hours to make a 10-minute task take 5.
Well, I think every programmer I've ever met is fascinated in the same way. So that's great. Mitch had a question here. Mitch?
Actually, it's a comment. I just want to say, is it fair to say that most of this design you've done with the Stream Decks and Companion is to make your job easier as a one-man band?
Absolutely. Mine, and I do have a couple workers that sometimes do some cutting and directing for me, and it's for me and for them. Usually a lot of times what happens is I'll do something to make sense, and then when they're sitting down, and I'm like, why didn't you do that thing that I showed you how to do? I'm like, oh, because it was harder or whatever. And that's when I start rethinking, like, oh, maybe this is a better way. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it's starting to look like a marketable product, from the way it looks. It's very well designed.
Yeah, but that's an interesting place you went there. I mean, you've designed it. It's kind of came from your brain. And so you find it sometimes easy, but sometimes not as easy to train somebody else on something that's that specific.
Well, that's absolutely right, because there's so much stuff in here that I've designed for my use case. In for example, let me see here. So this is an example of this is basically the card that shows on, if you go to our portal for our live streaming, there's a card for each event, and I want those cards to look good. I want them to look like ESPN Plus. And so I have this custom Python program that via the API of our streaming provider goes in and grabs the data of what the game is, and then automatically generates these graphics and uploads them back in. And for me, it works. It makes perfect sense, but I don't think I could ever hand this off to a student to do. It just wouldn't work.
Interesting. All right, let's go to the next question.
From Mickey Makachor from Philippines. And can you talk about building your outdoor camera packages for installation and the ingenuity and resourcefulness that you've put into designing and building them?
Yeah, so let's go. Let me share again. So during the pandemic, our campus was shut down. And that meant we didn't have fans couldn't come and watch. And for sports like, basketball and baseball, that was fine because we were streaming all those anyways. Tennis, we weren't. And so we needed to find a solution that our parents could watch our tennis matches when no one was allowed on campus. And so this is our court. And I needed to find a way to stream 6 courts of tennis in a way that I did not have to do a lot of, setting up and tearing down and stuff like that. And so what we ended up doing is that's where I got into the Ada NDI cameras, and they are, they're not great cameras, but for what they are, they're super handy. And it's, for $350, I just plug in a network cable and I get an NDI feed. Super easy. And so with those cameras, I put them in these outdoor security enclosures. And so you've got the camera there. It's a little mic preamp, and this Comica, that's just an omnidirectional lav mic. That's kind of, sitting right up there. And it's all powered through PoE. So one PoE cable comes in, powers the camera, the preamp, the mic. And so now I have a fleet of cameras that I don't really have to do anything for. I set them up at the beginning of the season. They stay up all season long. And when we have tennis matches, I've actually got a script that I write that goes into our streaming provider, updates the RTMP keys and turns the streaming on. And then when the match is done, I run it again and it turns it off. And this is kind of this was temporary to just kind of get things running. We've since moved all this stuff into this shed, but you can see all these cameras. There's 6 cameras just come back to this little box into a little switch, and from the switch it goes out to this ubiquity right here. And so these 6 tennis courts all stream wirelessly over this ubiquity bridge. And so this is an example of what it looks like. And so for each match, for each court, there's an individual court stream. So if you want to watch your player on court 1, you can watch your player on court 1. And so we have these 6 individual NDI or RTMP feeds that come directly from the camera. And then if we have if we don't have much going on, I will take where RTMP feeds out of the camera for the individual courts. But if we don't have much going on, I'll take one of my other computers and bring those NDI feeds back into vMix and then stream out basically a multi-view. So someone can choose whether they want to watch an individual court or they want to watch all 6 courts at the same time. And then I also added basically a custom scoring app. So if we have someone that can do it, basically I give them a little phone and a URL, and they can go and update the scores on their phone, and then those scores update on the broadcast as well. So
it's really nice. That is it's just, I can't imagine the parents during the pandemics whose kids were in these matches didn't just really appreciate what you managed to do for them.
And like I said, the tennis is one of the matches where our numbers are tiny, but it's the right thing to do from our perspective. And so, we made sure that our parents were able to watch their children compete.
Well done. Well done. Let's go to the next question.
Ronnie Settle, La Plata, Maryland, asking, can you show the equipment you use for remote feeds like tennis? And do you have a return program feed for the commentator?
So I should have done this question. We should have got to this one before the last one.
Let me see. I do have it depends on the broadcast, and if we have a play-by-play person, then there will be a return feed. How that actually is implemented depends on the sport. For basketball, it's an SDI feed from my office down to the court. For lacrosse and soccer, it's NDI, an NDI feed. And actually for lacrosse and soccer, I have it configured where if the scoring people in the booth have a question about a goal, they can call me up and I can actually show them a replay separate that goes out from the broadcast. And so the broadcast is doing its thing and I can just run back a replay just for them. So that's kind of a neat little feature.
Very much so. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. Josh asked, it seems expanding the scale and scope of your offerings has not significantly affected your equipment, budget, or staff. How do you justify the extra effort when your effort is not always matched? What continues to drive you to do more with less?
Making all this stuff work is the fun part. I'm not directing a show. It's fun, but it's fun because I get to use the things I built, not because I have some desire to be a director. And to me, making all this stuff work and plugging things in and finding creative solutions, that's the fun part. And that's the part of my job where I get to do it. And I might do it if I didn't get paid. Right now, I'm working on our softball kit, and let me show you what our softball kit looks like. And so our softball kit is basically, I've got these 2 cases with all this equipment in it. And kind of the gist is so that we can have a remote, we can have a play-by-play person at our softball venue. And our softball venue there's no press box. There's nothing like that. It's just a tent. And so for years, I'm lugging out a computer and under a tent and setting up, vMix or Wirecast under this tent in the rain and whatever. And that just is not sustainable. And so I wanted to get all that stuff back, get those feeds back to my office. And so I built these cases, and so I've got, the PA case and the play-by-play case. And we're kind of at a point this year where we're not going to have any play-by-play for softball. And I know that that's a decision that's been made, but I can't help but like working on my play-by-play case to make sure it still works. And it's like, I could just be like, oh, we're no play-by-play. I don't have to worry about this case. But like, there's like, well, maybe, what if, maybe. And so, putting everything together and making it work, that's fun. That's the fun stuff. That's the stuff that I really enjoy doing.
Sky had a comment.
Well, you're being creative, and that's what's fun. Are you finding that the technology is allowing you to move forward faster versus the original hardware and copper, putting things in software versus lots of additional plugs that you had to wire and weld and things?
Sure. I mean, NDI has changed what we're capable of doing. Like, I can do so much more with NDI that, with equipment that I have. And, there's times when I cuss in NDI and like, why is this not working? But it, it's not working, and then it works, and it didn't cost me anything. So, okay.
Well, there's always weather and rats that get into old hardware too. So there's always going to be something.
Absolutely. Let's go to the next question.
Next question in from Douglas Carmichael. Do you have to feed in-venue displays as well as the stream, and how do you manage that?
Not really. The only in-venue display we have is football, and at football, we actually have the local cable access television station. They come in and do our they cover our football games, and so I don't have to do much in-venue stuff.
Okay, I think you've still got a screen share going. Let's move to the next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA, asking, what is an example of a hack that you use to solve a problem that might otherwise be addressed with extra budget or personnel?
Good question, Chris. What do you think of?
I mean, everything. Like, let me share screen again. Take a look. This is a swimming setup from a swim meet, our conference championship we did last year, and this was at King County Aquatic Center up there by you, Sky. This was a championship event. It was our conference championship, and we were the host, and so we were responsible for streaming. And I wanted to make sure we're putting out a good quality broadcast. And when I got there, the plan was to use Score Shots, which is this little device that you pay $500 a year for, and it plugs into your scoreboards and gives you data. Well, when we got there, it didn't work. And I spent an hour on the phone with them and trying to sort things out. And eventually we determined that they had made an update that now this no longer works with the Swiss timing system that they use at KCAC. And so I ended up during the first session handwriting a new program that extrapolated the data from their Swiss timing system so that I could bring it into our broadcast. And so I've got that. And then at the same time, this is our camera for that broadcast. And this was a one-man show. I was switching and running the camera and graphics and everything. And so I hacked together this little thing where, the top camera or the top monitor, that's the camera. This one down here is the program feed. And then this is a Stream Deck via a web browser, and there's another Stream Deck right here. And so I could man the camera and switch the camera at the same time, pull up graphics, all that from just kind of one place. And it just kind of when I showed up, I had a concept of what I was going to do, but really it was just kind of putting pieces together and like, if I bring this Stream Deck over here, then I can run the camera and change at the same time. And so, just kind of hacking things together like that.
Next question.
Next question from Xander Snell in Miami. Do you have advertising? And if not, why? Wouldn't ad sales make administration pay much more attention And would that fund yourself and a small team?
We have some advertising, not much. We've got 3 or 4 sponsors that we play commercials for. The problem is the target audience that we serve is so diverse in terms of location. So, for example, like a high school down the road, they can sell ads through the roof because everyone that goes to that game lives in that town. Well, 90% of the people that watch our stream or come to our games don't live in our town. So an advertisement for a local company just doesn't make a ton of feasible sense. So for us, we do have some advertising, but I think a big component of that advertising is actually just philanthropic, and that they get some value out of it, but they're also giving back to a local university.
Fair enough. Next question.
Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas. How are you achieving replay?
vMix. We use vMix. Let me see if I can give you an example. Like I said, this is my screen when I'm looking at a basketball broadcast, and this primarily I'm looking at this multi-view. And this is on this left corner right here. This is the vMix replay instance. And because we don't have a lot of manned cameras, because it's a one-person shop, the replay workflow for me is basically capturing previous amount of time. So I've got my hand on this button right here while I'm watching the game, and as soon as I see something cool happen, I hit that button, and that button captures a replay starting 3 seconds prior. And so real quickly, I can go capture that replay. I can define which camera I want to use, and then I hit play. And so with 3 buttons, I have a replay out. I think I have an example of this one. Let's see if I can find this one. Let's see. Thought I had an example of the replay. Oh, yep, there it is right there. All right, so here's an example right there. Play happens. I hit the button, and within 2 seconds, I've got a replay of that event. And now that that has some limits in that, if I miss the button, I miss that opportunity. I can go back and adjust later, but as a one-man shop, if I miss the button, I need to keep concentrating on the show. I can't go back. Oh, like I miss it. Let's go find that replay so we can show it again. It's either I get it or I don't, for that moment in time. And, it's not perfect. And because you're limited by time, there's sometimes where, you cut off the very end, or you cut off the beginning, and it's not a perfect replay, but it's better than nothing.
Fair enough. Let's go to the next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington, asking, are you also working with students to help with the media services for the university?
No, we don't. Our school's small. We really don't have media services. I have 2 student photographers that help get photos of our events, but that's pretty much it.
Sky, do you have a question about this?
I just want to encourage you, because the Herculean work that you're doing, the 90% of this effort that's underneath, the iceberg concept is technologically forward. And in this media world that these students, I looked at your website. It's beautiful. I love the technology that's engaging. They're bragging about technology there. So I'm just thinking now that everybody's a producer, everybody's a writer, what you have to offer is a huge opportunity. So I'm trying to help you find the carrots.
Yeah, no, it is. It's complicated.
It is complicated. Don't disagree. I want to encourage you, because what you're showing today is amazing and awesome. And I would love to figure out how to get you some more love out there.
Let's go to the next question. That's one.
I've got a question for you, Chris. How much of your graphics are updated with a backend database or data source?
All of them. Basically, I have. So let's see. Let's show. No, not this one. We'll start this one. And so this is just a collection. I've just cut together a handful of some of our graphics that we have. The score bug is coming from the scoreboard controller. This starter graphics are. Oh wait, I'm not sharing, am I? Let's come back to that. Let's come back. So this in this example, that the score bug down here, this data is coming from two places. All the score data, like the points and the time and the period and stuff like that, all that is coming from from the in-venue scoreboard console. And I have a little serial device plugged into the scoreboard, and I wrote a Python program to extrapolate that data and export it out into a JSON file that then vMix can ingest. The colors and the team names, that stuff all actually comes from a Google Drive or a Google Doc. And so I have a Google Doc where I can then go and I can just change what teams are playing, and that will then automatically update all those graphics in vMix. For each team, I basically have the names, their codes, what the file name is for their logo. And so basically just changing a field in a Google Doc then updates the graphics in vMix. As far as the stats, stuff like this these starter stuff, that's all coming from one of two places too. It's coming from the stats computer, so that XML file that's coming out with all who scored what when, and it's also coming from another Google sheet that we populate with the home and away teams information that actually then generates a PA script for a public address announcer. And because that information is in there, I pulled that in. So we have hometowns and high schools and stuff like that. And then I have another Python script that based on that information goes to their website and downloads their photo.
Nice. Let's go to you have something else?
Well, let's see. It's just a couple. So this is another example. This is conference games going on at the same time. And so I have a Python script that is going to whoever's the host team, it goes to their website and grabs the current score and time for their current game. And so we can show the current, basically a little score ticker. And then I think that's about it.
Nice. All right, let's move to the next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, how did you decide on vMix instead of Wirecast or another application?
I started with Wirecast and ran into a wall. Wirecast just doesn't do as much as vMix. For a while, I was, working on Wirecast in the forums and asking I want to try and do this. I want to do this. And I kept getting the answer, well, vMix can do that. And it's just come on, I don't I'm using Wirecast. I've got a pro version of Wirecast. I want to use what I have. I don't want to spend $1,000 on a new piece of software. Well, it got to a point where we added a new team. And so for the first time, we were going to have 3 events that needed to be streamed at the same time. And so I needed another piece of software. I was like, well, let me try the vMix trial. And so I downloaded vMix, and after about a week, I was like, all right, no more Wirecast. It's not even close. For what I'm doing, it's just not. vMix is so much more powerful in terms of the scripting and you can hack it, and there's triggers and do this when this happens and this when that happens, and there's just that's not the case with Wirecast.
Next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York, asking, would love to see how the specs for the outdoor cam, specifically how you power the preamp with the power over Ethernet.
Yeah. So there is I have a PoE. Let's see, right here is a PoE to 12 volt adapter. And so PoE comes into there and pulls out 12 volts from the PoE, and then 12 volt to the preamp, and then there's just a 12 volt barrel splitter. One goes to the preamp, one goes to the camera, and that's it. And actually, in the initial testing, what I found was that if you powered the camera via PoE, you could plug a 12 volt into the 12 volt input and get 12 volt out. There was no diode protecting that. But I was like, that's not a good solution. It works, but that's probably not a safe solution.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, what is Daktronics unit on top of the play-by-play rack, and how does it interface with vMix?
I'm guessing this is what he's talking about. So that's the Daktronics All Sport 5000. That is the scoreboard controller. So we've got a handful of these all over campus, depending on what venue. There's at least one for every scoreboard we have on campus. And so this is what sits at the table, and people press in, start the clock, stop the clock, blah, 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 whatever. And that is, like I said before, there is a serial port on the back of that I am extracting the serial data out and converting it into a JSON file that then is read by vMix.
Nice. Next question.
From Ronnie Hofsoy in Tromsø, Norway. Ronnie asks, when things start to go south as a one-man show, there is limited capacity to change or fix things. What is the worst case you've experienced, and what happened and why? What could have saved the production?
Well, okay. Okay. Let's go to my share screen because I want to make sure everyone sees this. All right, let's clear this. So watch closely. This is one of our softball games.
Ouch! Ouch!
And so that ended the broadcast.
Yeah, I think so. Foul tip directly into the camera. What are the chances?
Yeah, it was actually it. Fortunately, it was. The camera was fine. I still used the camera. It was just a little chipped up. But what actually happened is just that the power got knocked out. And so, I was at another venue, and so I couldn't get there right away. And so for the next, 20, 30 minutes, we were just broadcasting a blue screen and the score bug. So the score bug was accurate, you could hear sound, but you just couldn't see anything.
Unbelievable. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, you mentioned the PA announcer in the venue pictures you're showing. I don't see any PA cabinets or truss. Where are they?
So no, and it depends on the venue. For basketball, the PA person is just at the table with everyone else. For softball, softball's a little different because, like I said, there's no like press box or anything like that. It's just a tent, and so literally the only infrastructure at softball is a cone speaker mounted to the top of the fence, and so that's where this PA case comes in, and before I was doing anything, we had this PA case. It comes in. It's basically an amplifier. You plug in a microphone and it plugs into the speaker. And what I did is basically add some streaming capabilities, and there's a Kill-A-View in there and a handful of other things. And but that allows me to basically hide all my streaming stuff in the PA case that they have to set up anyways.
Fair enough. Got a few more questions here. Let's get to the next one.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, PA. Besides the live streaming for sports, what other creative content do you produce? For example, student photos, programs, etc. Are you using any unique solutions to get more done with less?
Yeah. So, like I said at the beginning, I basically anything creative or technical is what is kind of under my purview. I manage our social media. manage our photographers. I used to take all our photos, and as you know, more of the streaming stuff kind of took off. I had to do less of that, and so I have a student crew of 2 and another person who comes in and takes photos for us. And we do media dates, which is kind of a goofy name because there's no actually media there, but it's basically a photo day where the teams come in and white seamless and get creative shots, and then we can kind of do things with that. One of the things one of the things I struggled with is we need to put out game day posts on social media. So every day we have a game, we need to put out a post and say, here's the game, here's the info for that game. And in our busy weekends, that can be 25, 30 posts a weekend. And so I need to come up with a graphic for all those. And so what I ended up doing is building a website that scrapes our schedule, and that info, I kind of fine tune it, and then it exports it to Photoshop. Then Photoshop exports all the graphics out automatically, uploads them back to the website, and then tweets them out when appropriate. And so that's just kind of another one of those examples of things where I'm hacking together programs and scripts to save time.
Next question.
Ronnie Settle from La Plata, Maryland. As we end the show, is there anything else to your slide deck that you would like to share?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I could share this. One of the events that one of the things that I do is, in addition to everything else, I'm also the lead. I'm the timer for our track and cross country meets, and so there's been a handful of times where we're trying to stream a cross country meet and time it at the same time. And I included this just because I think it's kind of geeky and people might like it. When we're talking about timing a track and field meet, this is the camera we use, and it's what's called a slit scan camera. And so it takes a picture. This one in particular takes a picture 1,000 pixels high by 1 pixel wide, and it just adds it one onto the other. And so you end up with something like this. And so you can see here, this right here, this section right here is what the camera sees, and then you see the image. And so I don't know, it's just kind of a neat thing that I think is super geeky. And
that's fascinating. So that's how you actually determine who crossed the finish line first when it's nose to nose.
Yep, it's nose to nose. And then based on which pixel in the image you select, that determines which what the time was. So
interesting.
Yeah, just a little geeky thing.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. All right, we have one more question here.
And it's from Douglas Carmichael. Who created your base graphics templates and transition animations? They're very impressive.
So all the static type graphics, like the data driven stuff, I did all those in vMix. The stuff in for intros and our famous intro that's got the famous Mitchell Hill announcing on it. Those are done with templates from Envato, and basically a handful downloading templates and piecing them together and updating them. And that's the skill set that I don't have a ton of time to. I can figure out how to update things, but I just don't have the time to create stuff like that from scratch. So most of those are templates.
Chris, thank you so much. This was a great thing. If you wouldn't mind stopping your screen share, there we go. We're back to normal here. Really a fascinating thing that you do. Is there any last wrap up comment that you might have before we kind of take off out of here?
No, I mean, the only thing, if anyone's interested, my chrissabato.com, there's a blog post that I linked to the spreadsheet if you wanted to, or the Google sheet. It's there. If you wanted to poke around the photos, it's there. And the other thing that is as you're looking at the things that I do, one of the things to remember is the audience, and that, we're not ESPN. And so there's a lot of things that we don't do well, and it's not, I think the stuff we do is awesome, but I'm also a little bit self-conscious about the quality of some of it. And but for most of us, it is what it is. So yeah.
Well, of course, there's a delta between what you're doing and what $1 million sports operation does. But boy, you have made that delta as small as humanly possible on your scale. I think we're all kind of jaw dropped in awe of what you managed to do here. So well done. All right, got a couple of announcements here. Don't forget, tomorrow, FlyPack Design and Construction. Sometimes we need to take our studio with us, and we'll be talking about that on Friday. Saturday, the One Learning Community comes up. Sunday is introspection, as always. This afternoon, after the show, Isadora Lab with Elwish and Spiro. That happens at 10 a.m. Pacific, and calculate your times from that. And thank you all. We have some thank yous to say, particularly everybody here on the panel. Without the panel, this show doesn't exist. So thank you for the expertise, everybody who came in tonight and helped us answer all these audience submitted questions. To our producers, the people who watch the show and enter those questions, thank you very much for being here. Without you, this is impossible. And then there is our fabulous behind the scenes crew. Without them, none of this would happen. They will be on the credit roll here in just a second. So pay attention to who's helping us get this done every day. Thank you very much. And that pretty much takes care. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for watching.
Great job, Chris.
Absolutely. Well done.
Thank you. Stu, the show took us out into the field. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to play with vMix today?
I'd forgotten Envato was a thing. That's a good resource.